this is a tad different, Steve, because I'm not saying Israelites. Actually, take away.
Just black people compete.
Well, because Boyd was saying, like, it's small, right? You and Amari Stoudemire, right? So, but what has the danger of what has happened? You're talking about we need divide, we need such. What has happened is that your message, right, or whatever of the Israelite Union has now been turned into a weapon that is being used versus the Jewish people to make them fearful and scared. Unfortunately, we're reacting that way instead of standing up strong. But it is felt in the Jewish community, and it is being geared toward blacks. And there's in African American, there's a reason for that. I'll throw it to Boyd, and then Rudy.
My whole set that I've always stated is that it's a function of resources. The only way you get rid of racism is if everybody could have whatever they wanted whenever they wanted it. Everybody. It's impossible. You don't only get rid of hate and jealousy. Everybody can have it. You can't have that. And then when you peel the layers down and you look at the people from like the videos you sent me, they're living in a more impoverished environment. You don't see educated black men doing that, yet they're still black. And you will see uneducated, impoverished Caucasians or of any race, if they're desperate and they're living commingling, cohabitating, seeing the other as prey. Because if I need and you have, and I feel I can't survive without it, I'm taking it from you. We so happen to have the Chassid communities, lower socioeconomic, black communities that are living together. One's stronger than the other physically. We're both suffering. We both don't have. I see you have and I don't, though, and we both don't have much, but I see that the little we have, you have and I don't. I'm going to take it so I can survive. It's not systemic because you were born into a body that was dark. And you'll see that in any race, you'll see that in any environment, you'll see that in any people. If the whole entire United States was all the same complexion, we would have smaller subsets because some would have and so the people that want who don't have are going to become envious. And if they can prey on somebody, they will. It's not because we're born with some predisposition based off the complexion of our skin, the amount of pigment and melanin. So when I heard about this, when I heard about this is when being comprised of both spheres, being black, African American, and being Jewish, I hurt because I get an inside privy to this, and black folk, humans by nature, are going to look for an enemy when they don't have, because why do we want to look at ourselves to find the answer? That's a big one. And when you look at Jews, so let's just imagine Jews are, if you look at them and they have something that you want, let's look at them as a culture, people. We don't have the Chassids. We don't walk around with the best posture. We're not so well groomed. We're not in shape. We're overweight. We don't look athletic. We look like targets for somebody if there's a wolf around. And a wolf doesn't have to be because they're born a wolf. It has to be because they've been starved for so long. So we're not making it any easier for ourselves. Like with the videos you showed me, and then a African American chasing after the Jew in the street and then kicking him and punching him was horrific. And then another Jew, Chassid, coming on over and asking him to stop. And then the moment the guy gets up, the Jew takes off running himself. And he was the one asking him to stop. So this will take place amongst any demographic where one is viewed as having and the other as not having, and both kind of have the same lifestyle environment around them as far as they live in the same zip code. The whole zip code's pretty much the same. Crown Heights, you're not going to escape and find the bougie part of Crown Heights that I know of. You're going to have that, and it's going to happen. The narrative blames it on race, on both ends. African Americans saying Jews, they have this, they're taking over this. Now, those are just people you see every day because you live in the Chassids you live in the same environment with them, with the Orthodox community. You live in the same environment and you see they have and you don't. That is how they look at it. They have, I don't, so we're going to take when we can so I can survive. That is why you don't see, if it was that, you don't see NBA players coming down into Crown Heights and just beating up on Jews. So because they have. That's the common denominator, always resources. We, us, assign values to them. we assign names: fascism, racism, prejudice, bigotry. We assign racist to them. And I love what Rudy, who's my brother, my first brother has the same name, Rudy. So I love that name. As Rudy's, thank you, I love it, brother. And we assign these names and words. We're the race. He said it. We're the race of humans. If everybody's blind, if everyone on the planet became blind, how do we know it's humans? So that's what I go back to. I don't personally believe that any culture just about instinctively has anything towards another. It's what's taught, and if it's taught to them, it's because they're in an environment usually where the people teaching them are stripped of the resources as well. So they have that hate they've developed. Because when you have an enemy, it stops you from looking and saying, shit, what can I do myself to get out of this position? Or what did I do to put myself in this? And I hear hate from one side of my family sometimes towards a certain part of my genes, and I hear hate from the other side of my family towards another part of my genes. And I get to look deep, which they're both hating me at the same time when they're saying it. But they separate it because I'm related to them by blood, even though I'm the conduit between both sides. And I don't believe it will ever stop. What I do believe, and I spoke with Steve and you about this, Mike, what I do believe is the reason why I get to I've walked through projects many and many times looking like me, and I've never had a problem. And that's because we're animals first, and we're beings of energy. And when you hold yourself a certain way and you project a certain light from your spirit, animals understand animals, energy understands energy. You just know who to stay away from, who not to mess with. When you come walking through where you look like an easy target and you're around people that are desperate, it's going to happen. And their desperation may come from anger that they can't let out, like they want to be heard. So you could have one of those kids who's just going up to crack a Jew in the face and then keep it moving because he needs to be heard, because he's angry and he's not being heard at home. That's the end of my soapbox.
I'm gonna add a little bit because he said something that Boyd said something that kind of like gave me a better understanding of the whole situation. So with black people in America, all right, one of the black people's disdains, we're talking about an overall disdain towards the Jewish people, is this, all right? Now what Hitler did to your people was atrocious. It was evil. It was heinous. Now we see this often. We see it every year. We see movies about Hitler and what happened to the Jewish people. We see books being promoted. We see all kind of promotion of this historical evil event. For us who are still racially oppressed here in America, similar to what our ancestors were as slaves with no rights. Not even now, we still feel we don't have rights. I mean, that's why we're marching and arguing and protesting now, still in 2020. But with that, the black community is like, man, we see what happened to the Jewish people more than anything here in America. When you have us that are we're still underfoot, we don't see they don't. I mean, you get one slave movie and you get one slave movie every 6-7 years, you know? You know what I mean? And even that movie, and that movie is telling a white man's view of it. You know, the last movie with Harriet Tubman. I mean, they characterized the black man in the villain when that was not historically accurate. So you have the black community looking at that as, wow, they're catering to them, when in all actuality we're still kind of in the furnace to an extent, if you understand what I'm saying. And that's why the who controls what matters to black people. That's why who controls the media, who controls Hollywood, And it all goes back to a Jewish man, you know what I mean? A Jewish people, Jewish person. But they don't distinguish, hey, this is a corporation, this is a guy who owns these things. It's the people, but it's the people because of the situation in the history. So it's like, wow, we're seeing this, but what about our story?
It's beautiful because it's associated with the pain in a sense that, you know, we're suffering, and in the projection of that and the understanding, oh my gosh, you know, you guys are controlling everything, and hey, look at us, what about us, type of thing. Rudy, take the floor, tell us, we've spoken. I just want to give you the time, if you guys, Stephen Boyd is okay, I want to hear the thought, work it through.
I think this is just such an important conversation, and I wish more and more people had such conversations like this to really break down the ideas. I do want to start with two different points. First of all, this idea that Jews are only black or Jews are only white exists in many places. I don't know if you guys have heard of British Hebrew Israelism. It exists from white people as well, trying to claim that the Jews are the Aryan race and the white people and not the black people. So this idea of using, unfortunately, a reality of dividing ourselves based on our genetic features is something being manipulated and used when it comes to the identity of the Jewish people as well. Also, the nation of Israel has always come in many colors. We are not a nation of one color. You have the wife of Moses that was literally described as dark-skinned. You have King David that was described as a redhead. And those are two very different genetic features already that shows that people come in different colors and have always come in different colors. It's not only the colors that developed later when we were displaced in different places, but also we originally came in many colors. Now, to combat these ideas and to combat these things being spread and manipulation being done, we need to understand that truth has been suppressed. And because truth has been suppressed, people are angry and are looking for that truth. And if we're not able to have a more holistic conversation, people will get manipulated. In my experience, when I've spoken to a lot of people that are of the Black Israelite, Hebrew Israelite movement, that are more so of the sect that are hateful and rejecting of Jews that are more light-skinned, the second I have a conversation with them and let them know that I know about the fact that there are Jews in Africa, I know about the fact that 20% of the transatlantic slaves were Igbo Jews, I know about all those realities, it all of a sudden opens a gateway and unlocks the key to their heart. Because the second I say that, they're way more accepting of my own identity and having a conversation, and almost as if it diffuses their hate. It's sort of as if a lot of the hate was piled up and packed together because there wasn't a willingness to have a conversation over the truth that they have now found and want to relate to and express and bring up, but that is not being brought up by other communities. So I think we need to be able to have a more holistic understanding and conversation around that. And I think that's part of the tool to unlocking it. But the perception of who is really in power and who is really cared about, that's actually a perception that exists in both communities. You know, for example, people of color, like Steve said, you know, you'll look at, they'll have a lot of Holocaust movies, but you won't have a lot of slave movies, and even the slave movies aren't done properly. But when it comes to the Jewish people, we look at it and you go to a college campus and there are all these movements fighting for Black rights and against racism, but no one is sticking up and standing up against anti-Semitism. And if you go on a college campus, no one is openly anti-Black. People are openly anti-Jewish and anti-Israel. So in our experience, in our perception, it's like, whoa, you know, the system is siding with them and not with us. And in their perception, the system is siding with them and not with us. And the reality is the system is siding with neither one of us. The system is actually getting us to the conclusion that the other side is with the power. And so we need to attack the other side in order to fight the power. And that is exactly what happens in white societies. If you look at the history of anti-Semitism in Europe, why were Jews put as the tax collectors and the money lenders? Why were Jews put into those positions? When we're collecting taxes, we're not collecting those taxes for ourselves. We're collecting those taxes for the king and queen and for the people in power, because they understood that if we put the Jew in the position of power and make them seem as if they're the front face, the front man or woman to that power, then the people on the bottom, instead of rising up against the source of the problem, they will rise up against the Jew. And that's how we've been pinned and manipulated against each other. I do want to make another point when it comes to people controlling media. You do have a lot of Jews in positions of power who have been able to rise up in positions of power. And that's not because they were born with any sort of genetic powers that gives them an ability to rise. A lot of it has to do with culture, right? If you look at Jewish culture, for the most part, I'm generalizing now, part of Jewish culture is being literate. Now, most people in the world, you go back 200, 300, 400 years ago, were illiterate. Many Jews in Africa, like the Igbo Jews, have always been literate. And that's very unique to the region of Nigeria. But if you look at the Jewish community, most Jews have been literate because we have our bar and bat mitzvahs. And not only are we literate, we know how to read and write, but we ask deeper questions. And this rabbi said this, and this person said that, and I'm going to go and find a deeper answer. And because we develop that ability to think deeper and think outside the box, it also allows it to translate into the levels of success. Plus, we very much so value education. Not every single Jewish parent, but in most Jewish families and most Jewish parents, they teach their kids, you have to be the best that you could be. You want to be the best artist, be the best that you can be. You want to be the best doctor, be the best doctor. And not only that, let me give you all the opportunities that you can in order to achieve your dreams. Then there's a level of helping one another, which doesn't exist in every community, where Jews help one another. Your cousin or your brother or your uncle or your aunt and your sister is in the industry that you want to get into. Let me give them a call and connect you so that it helps you rise into a position of power. Now you have a contact. That is not something that exists within all minority communities. In fact, Jay-Z and Kanye West and a lot of African-American, Black, people of color, whatever someone may want to call it, a lot of these people that are artists today that represent those communities talk about how Jews tend to help one another, and this is something that has to be emulated within other communities in order to rise up into positions of power. When it comes to those people in media, just to finish off on this point, if you look at the people who control media, not all of them are Jews, and those that are Jews, they're usually people that really don't connect even to the collective of the Jewish people. So I think it's very problematic to take a small group of individuals that have risen into positions of power and may be doing good or bad things, and to generalize that as this is what the Jewish people are, what the Jewish people are doing, or the power that Jewish people harbor. Because most Jews are not rich. Most Jews have to struggle in order to obtain wealth and have had to struggle to obtain wealth. When my family moved to the US when I was 5, I was born in France, moved to Israel, then moved to the US, we didn't have anything. My dad came from nothing. I remember sharing a room with my brother. I remember going to, McDonald's for a Happy Meal toy for a birthday gift. That's what I remember growing up. And then eventually my parents were able to work and create businesses and companies and were able to establish a level of success that now translate into us having a good life. But to assume that that's the experience of every single Jew, or that the positions of power that some Jews have obtained is getting away from the conversation. So I think the bottom line cure to be able to heal the wounds that exist within both communities is to have a more honest and holistic conversation about the truths that have been suppressed.
That's great. That's awesome. I would like to say about, I like to touch on the college example you used, or I don't know if it was real or not, or just an example, but you were saying how the Jewish college students are getting anti-Semitic, they're getting attacked, it's anti-Semitic. And the Blacks, we get attacked and it's racism and we riot, we protest or whatever. And it's like for us, especially nowadays, now we're in the 2020s and, 2000, it's kind of, for us as so-called Black people, we're like, we've been fighting this battle for so long against this system. We're 100% go on it now. It goes down, boom, boom, boom. It's like throughout the generations, the attitude has changed. It's shifted from, we wanted to do our own thing, create our own cities. They were burned, they were destroyed. Then it went to the 60s, 70s to the, let's join their system. Then that generation changed to the Black Power movement. I'm black and I'm proud. I love my nappy hair. I don't want anything to do with white. I'm Black, And then that went from that 70s, went to the 80s. So, hey, we're all groovy, we're all good. Let's blend in. Then boom, but racism was there the whole time. And for issues to hit the Jewish people, the Jewish man and woman, we felt like, hey, it's for you to protest. It's for you to start it off, for you to get the ball rolling. We most definitely would join it. We've done it before. I know the history. I know Jews were there with us, walking, with us, marching with us. I know the history. Most don't, or a few don't. But for us, we feel it's for you to start your war. We'll start ours with the system. You guys start your war, and hey, we could come together, you know, and fight the common enemy. I mean, let's keep it real. There's a common enemy here, you know, and it's not us. But in ignorance, we think it's you. We think it's this. You think it's us, or not even so that you think it's us. It's a lot of other people feel that we get more. We've got opportunities, and or you know, we've got more at our fingertips here, when the racial oppression hasn't stopped. I mean, it's still the same. You know, it is still the same. I'm a two-time world champion. I live in a beautiful suburb in Pennsylvania, yet I still got pulled over and racially profiled last year. It happens. You know, I got a Suburban full of kids, you know, and the cops pull us over. It could have been bad. I mean, I'm petrified when the police pull up on me, you know. My wife, you know, it's so, I mean, and I'm not even going to go on the trip of the justice system, the school system, not teaching our schools, not giving them, we have books in the schools, and where I grew up in Philadelphia from the 70s. Kids in my class, kids were opening books, finding their parents' name in those books. Hey, that's my mom, that's my dad, you know, because the system, the racial oppression, they did not give us the education, or they didn't give us the tools. I'm sorry, I'll say that. They didn't give us the tools to have an equal opportunity at education. Now, there are sprinkled, you know, people who, parents who, hey, you going, just like he said, just like Rudy said, be the best at what you do, you know, do this. But then you have the racial oppression of crack cocaine being introduced to our neighborhoods only first. And that is true. My father's a crack addict to this day because of that, you know, and aunt, she died a crack addict, numerous family members. And I can tell you, Philadelphia before the crack epidemic was a beautiful place. Like the neighborhoods, we looked out for each other. We stood for each other. I could go to people's houses and eat dinner without anyone wearing it. After crack hit, it was like a dark veil hit the city. So, you know, there's a lot of damage there, man.
So it's very interesting, 100% to hear that. Of course, right? I don't think anyone can at this point ever hopefully, but especially at this point, say the pain's not there, the suffering's not there. If anyone says systemic racism doesn't exist, and I know there are people out there because I've spoken with a lot of them, but if anyone says that, obviously we're talking about the ignorance or the experience that they're not open to and such. My question to you is this, and it's one that I am interested in, and I think a lot, I don't want to generalize here and say the Orthodox community, but I think it's felt. And it might be a tough question, but I'm going to ask. And it's this. It's the hypocritical feeling of to say, give us rights. And again, I don't even know if if it's the right answer to say that, because we're fighting for equality, right? And maybe you have to be hypocritical and whatnot, but it's felt in a sense of give us rights, right. And then, but on the backs of others. But then we're gonna do the same thing. You know, we're gonna do the same thing that's being dealt to us. Okay, because it's not so worse for you. You know, we're gonna do it to you to get to where we need. I think that's where a lot of the confusion is, especially I think because Jews are feeling it in a sense that the African American community, you know, sees Jews a certain way and is reacting to it. I don't know.
That's interesting. I would say this to that.
Okay.
The so-called black people, we're asking for rights. We've been fighting for this since Martin Luther King, and we're still fighting for it. It's not that we're asking for rights over anyone. You know, it's you know, we're taking care of ourselves. You know, like you have to take care of home first. Mm-hmm. Like I said, we've joined so many other movements. The women's rights movement, the LGBT movement. I mean, that's majority black in America also. Which hey, do your thing, you know. I haven't joined it, but hey, a movement's a movement, you know, and we've joined it, and but this one movement, give us rights. We need rights. It's not on the backs of anybody else. That, you know, we're still trying to grab something that we looked for, that we believe should be allotted to every and any man. Why haven't we got it yet? And that's what we feel. So that's why it's a spearheaded movement.
No, but I'm gonna ask Boyd also this question in the African American community, because I understand your experience, right? Your education, it's not that way, right? We want rights, you know. Let's work to it and such. However, I mean, again, comments are comments. I understand, but it seems like, especially from the posts in social media from celebrities, the temperature in the African American community, the Black Israelite, I feel trope with the argument that is being said. No, the Jews are you know, and that grows, as we know, in the history of Jewish people. My question is, that's the danger, in a sense that it feels hypocritical. Not you, but it feels hypocritical for someone to say, let's fight for rights, but then to say you're not a Jew and get angry about Jews and have that feeling toward Jews. Boyd, what do you think in that kind?
It's absolutely hypocritical.
Okay.
But our nation, our existence is more of a do as I say, not as I do, as a culture of humans. And I battle with that internally all the time with my own loved ones, most close loved ones. You know, I remember when Hurricane Sandy happened, I had a friend, and she went with Chabad and went down to Coney Island to help. And she said that whoever was the organizer for everything said, there's only a certain amount of us. If they don't have a mezuzah on the door, don't help them. And I remember that poem all the time. During the Holocaust poem, at first they came for the socialists. I wasn't a socialist, so I did nothing. Then they came for the homosexuals. I was homosexual, so whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Then they came for the Jews, and no one was left to help me. And that kind of goes back to the concept of we're all connected. Every single thing on this planet is connected. You stay alive long enough, stuff will reach you. And to deny yourself that, it will sting you eventually. To have an understanding of that, to speaks more to what Rudy said. It's just the race, the human. Let that be enough. Because if you close your eyes, everyone's the same. Everyone at the same time close their eyes, then we made decisions what we're going to do for each other. All we have are voices. And it hurts me because I hear a story like that. It makes me not proud to be what I am. And at the same time, I see the video clips she sent me of people who look like my family beating up on people who look like my family. And it makes me unhappy as well. So I agree with you. It is hypocritical. We're not gonna, they know it's hypocritical. They know what they're doing, but it goes back again to fear and a good acronym, false evidence appearing real, based off a lack of resources, and who has what I believe I need, not even want, what I believe I need, then it goes to want. Well, some people don't understand what they want is not what they need, but they'll say, I need that, and they'll go about it. So when they jump somebody, and then they take their Jordans, I needed those. That's how you convince yourself with that self-talk. So it is hypocritical. I'm going to keep harping on back to it. I don't know how to change that. The way I try to approach everything is what worked for me. You learn how to defend yourself. You emit a certain type of energy everywhere you go. People, when they come to hurt you, the majority, they're rolling the dice that you're not going to do anything back. You're not going to hit them back, and they're still going to get what they want as the desired end state. Unless you're super angry, there's some chemicals, something, just one of those days. If you know you're going to get hit back, you'll think twice about fighting. And so having that confidence walking around, your chest out and your head up, instead of looking a little schlemielish, well, I believe only off of my experience. I walk through the projects frequently, and I'm thank God not going to nothing's happened. But I'm also aware of the energy I put out. But that's because I have the confidence. Same way Steve could tell you, I have the confidence to know how to defend yourself. It changes everything, and that talks back to the animalistic, energetic level of organisms, I believe, and that's us communicating without having to move our mouth. It's understanding a presence when it's coming through. If that all goes again back to confidence, and something happened between Jews in Israel, and granted, Jews migrated to the U.S. before Israel was declared a state, because that was after World War II. They all didn't come after that. But you have like this, as if we get our manlyhood chopped off here in the U.S. when it comes to also remembering that we are animals first, and you can't just be tough in the corporate world, in the boardroom where you know there's no threat physically.
True.
We have a whole country of people putting on the uniform and serving. When I speak to Jewish people in the United States and I say I'm in the United States Army, I'm in the Army, they go, "Oh, in the Israeli Army?" And then when I break their heart and say, "No, I'm helping defend where you live now, not over there," I say, "Do me the favor, though. I mean, do yourself a favor. I'm not holding you back. Fly your butt on over the IDF and go enlist. I'm not stopping you." I don't appreciate that you don't understand. Also over here we need it, but it's also part of a culture. And I think it came a lot with capitalism. You put money into one, you put in the other. You reap more rewards from the corporate world with what you can gain back, especially if you're not born with the physicality to you. Long limbs, tall, jumping ability, these things, the other way to make money here in the States. And you can influence more with the more money you have, but you're not going to stop that dude when you're walking on the sidewalk from coming and cracking the shit out of you should they decide to, because you're good in the boardroom. And Israeli Jews would not allow somebody to come up to them and do that. And something happened across this ocean here. And that's what saddens me. I'm pacified. I cannot stand being called a nice Jewish boy. I am not a boy. I stopped being a boy a long time ago. 4 days after high school, I started West Point. I stopped being a boy. So that's still in the language that we use. What's a nice Jewish boy looking like you're doing in the Army? Well, there's a whole country of our people in the Army. Did you forget that? These things all the time.
We do.
So that is what I think it starts with: confidence. Everything. And remembering what's a nice Jewish whatever like you doing in the Army, when that's what our whole country does to survive.
Before Rudy, I'm just going to add quickly, psychologically also we have to do that. Sorry, go Rudy.
You're talking about the hypocrisy, and I think the conditions are set for that reality to exist, and we have to shift the conditions in order for a different reality to exist. What Boyd is saying is true. We're all part of one body. This world is one body, and there is a singularity within the body. So in your own body, you have several organs. Those several organs are made up of different cells, those cells of molecules and of atoms. And an individual can make up a family, can make up a tribe, can make up a nation, can make up a region, can make up a whole planet. So there's a balance between the singularity and also the individual that exists amongst a greater group, but we're not functioning together properly. Am I still there?
Yeah.
I think Boyd got frozen. We're not functioning together properly. And when an organ or all the organs are not functioning properly, the body ends up being sick. And you create the conditions for people to be manipulated and for people to be used. So a way to heal that is a lot through education, through empowerment, through changing the narratives. I would say most Black leaders today are not aware of Jewish-related issues. And most Jewish leaders today are not aware of Black-related issues. This wasn't the case in the 70s and in the 60s with civil rights movement, but it is the case today. So we don't even have conversations and contacts with one another. Most Jews in most of the world, but especially most Jews, have no idea about our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Israelite and Hebrew brothers and sisters that are still in Africa. Even the Lemba tribe, their DNA they have Cohen DNA within them. They found the chromosome genes, and they've traced their DNA to being literally the most closely related people amongst the diasporas. So how do we not even know that? So I think we need to also understand that we need to heal a lot of trauma that exists. If you have a woman that deals with an abusive relationship, for example, which is a horrible situation, there are several ways in which one can deal with such a trauma. One can fight back and remove themselves from that situation. One can make excuses for that reality and say, oh no, well, it was just one time, or oh no, well, he was just drunk, or he didn't really mean it. And then there's also the level of blaming yourself, of saying, no, it was actually my fault that I did that. I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that. And when it comes to a lot of anti-Semitism, you have very few Jews today that are not in Israel that have a mindset of fighting back. And most Jews are usually making excuses and pretending that everything is fine and putting their heads under the ground, going and congregating into our little shtetls and our little communities and not dealing with our issues. And then you also have some Jews who do side with the oppressor, who do side with those that are anti-Israel and anti-Jewish. But we need to be able to rise above that trauma and to give the tools to the next generation to be able to stand up for themselves, not only physically, but also intellectually, mentally, ideologically, emotionally. These are not tools that we're given. For me, what started everything for me in my journey of being an activist was actually an experience with such a trauma. At the age of 7, I took a trip to London with my mom and my younger brother for the first time. We got on the red tour bus that does the trip of London. And as we were waiting in the line, there was a black family, a mother and 2 kids that were the same age as me and my younger brother. And we were playing in the line, and then that family went on the bus. And as we got onto the bus driver noticed that my mom had a Hebrew writing on her shirt. And he said, "Excuse me, is that written in Jewish?" Mom's like, "No, it's written in Hebrew, but it's the language of the Jewish people, if that's what you're asking." He's like, "Oh, so you guys are Jews?" She's like, "Yeah, we're Jews. What's the problem?" He's like, "I don't want any Jews on my bus. You have to get off." My mom's like, "I don't know who you think you are. I'm definitely not getting off this bus." And he got up, grabbed my mom, and threw her off the bus. And everything went so quickly. I didn't know what to do. I was not prepared at the age of 7 to deal with such a situation. I remember the black woman with her 2 kids, screaming, "How this can't happen. This happened to my people in America," getting everyone riled up and standing with and calling the police. So that's what triggered me into becoming an activist. But why did I have to deal with something like that to wake up? Why weren't those tools given to me and to other people before having to deal with that? It's almost as if anti-Semitism is a correction for our mistakes within the generation of not teaching the next generation who they are and how they're supposed to be. Last point that I want to make in terms of education, something that I'm partaking in very soon. I'm going to Africa actually around October, December. And my goal is to document the histories, the cultures, the aspirations, the struggles, and the stories of all these Jews, Hebrews, Israelites that are displaced in Africa in order to educate, firstly, for me, the Jewish world on who they are, but also the rest of the world on what their stories are and how do we actually help them and help them connect to the larger collective of Am Yisrael. And I think they're doing things that shift culture, that empower people, that educate people, that have more holistic conversations, that unite people. That's how we shift things and change things. Just to finish off one last point, Steve said something earlier about, if the Jews want their own movement, you have to create the own movement. And he's absolutely right. For me, when I look at the sentence of never again, the statement that a lot of Jews say after the Holocaust, to me, never again doesn't mean just because you say it, it doesn't happen again. It's a generational commitment that we must make sure in each generation that it doesn't happen again. And in order to prevent it from happening again, we have to organize, unite, recognize, and fight against where there are things and problems against our people. So it is the responsibility of that community to fight against the evils that exist that are targeting their community and to create coalitions and to help create a space for other people to join. Oftentimes today on college campuses, when it comes to Jewish liberation, Jewish rights, Israel groups, whatever it is, it's usually in the Hillels and in the Chabad houses, and there's not even a space for non-Jews to get involved with that, or non-Jews to educate themselves on what there is. So we need to create a space that educates our next generation, empowers our next generation, but also creates coalitions and a space for others to join us as well.
I'm just going to end off with my quick perspective in the sense of.
Okay, can I add one?
Sorry. Yeah, go Steve. Yeah.
Sorry.
I do want to end at some point because I appreciate all of your times.
This is going to be quick. This is just 2 points.
Take your time.
I just want to address the one point of the hypocrisy, and no doubt it is very hypocritical for so-called Black people in America to get rights and to trample other people's rights, or to do what I seen you guys sent me the links. I didn't have time to watch the links. I was at our gym that we own, but hearing from what you're saying, about the links, it's obviously Black people, harming Jewish people. So that is completely hypocritical. But you have to understand also, us here, we are seeing racism towards in Israel towards the Ethiopian Jews that are there getting forced out. You know, so we're seeing a hypocritical side on the Israel part. You know, as you guys are seeing the hypocritical side on our part. You know, we're seeing the countless news articles and now with social media, many people are speaking about them getting forced out of Israel because they are Ethiopian Jews, because of this, because of their skin color. And there's a lot of, you know, there's racial things going on with them too. So we, like Boyd said, we're not going to stop it. You know, we're not going to stomp it out. What we need to do is even more forums like this. We need to do more community events with both parties, you know, bringing both people together. Hey, this is what we do. This is our culture. Hey, get to know them. Hey, we all don't have a share in the media. We all don't have a share in Hollywood. You know what I'm saying? We don't have nothing to do with George Soros. We don't have anything to do with this guy, you know. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, that, like I said, in the beginning of the Zoom video, ignorance, I believe, is the foundation of what keeps this hate going between each other, you know, black towards Jewish towards black. You know what I mean? I believe
you said a lot there, but I think Rudy can speak to it because you brought up a lot of interesting points.
Yeah, so when it comes to the situation of Israel, no Ethiopian Jew is being forced out of Israel, but there are issues with xenophobia and racism within every fabric of every society, and that's unfortunate reality of the world that we live in. But when you see things in the news and the media, ask yourself, what are the intentions of these news articles? Because they're trying to divide us into play off things that can be real, but play off of them and manipulate them into different proportions. You know, there is xenophobia in every community, and Israel is not free of that either. But there's no systemic racism in Israel. And for the most part, people accept each other. They don't care what they look like. They care mostly who they are and what you do. And the issues within Israel is more with left and right, religious and secular, and Israeli and Palestinian than skin color being dark or skin color being light. With Israel, it's a very unique situation because there have been aliyah movements. There have been people who migrated and come back to the land of Israel. And usually the latest group is the one that has the least amount of success because they're coming in with nothing, the least amount of ability to succeed in Israel because they don't yet speak Hebrew, aren't yet integrated into society, haven't developed and established themselves there yet. So the Ethiopian community is one of the newer communities, which is why they still have a generation that they've now overcome and have now integrated fully into the society. And of course, when you introduced a new group of people, the same way you had Yemenite Jews and Moroccan Jews and Jews of other backgrounds who have come in, when they had their first experiences coming in, there was a bit of friction with the people that were already living there. But it's definitely being manipulated in the news and in the media to get people to the conclusion of saying, oh, you deal with racism here? Oh, well, there's racism there. It must be the same thing. It actually isn't the same thing at all. And I think it not only maximizes and demonizes the suffering of what's happening in the identity of Israel, it also minimizes the experience of what's happening amongst people of color, black people, whatever you say, so-called black people in the United States.
May I share, please? And that was awesome, Rudy.
We could do 2 episodes of this.
Yeah.
True.
I'm only going to speak for one person, not myself, my friend. So I'm not going to generalize and say if it happens to one, it happens to all. I have a dear friend who's 23 now, served in the IDF. She speaks Hebrew fluent, grew up there, and she's about Beyonce's complexion. And she said her whole into the IDF was straight race-based hate because of the color of her skin. The color of her skin, like it's in the US, she said, was the same way. I know this, as unfortunate as it may sound, because my mother's born in that country, that even in that country, because it's nature, when there's a fixed amount of resources, you have to divide. And the easiest way is what you can divide by sight, and that is darker complected. They have hate in Israel, Jews amongst other Jews who are dark. She told me many a story, and even if she happened to have been the only Jew who was ever hated in all of Israel because of her color, it existed. So there's danger
everywhere, but that's
right.
everywhere.
I agree. Right, but the blanket statement was that doesn't exist in Israel just now, but it does exist
No,
in
no,
Israel.
it does. It
No,
does. Absolutely
I'm
does.
assuming that it's
Color,
systemic.
off, color, off of color alone. Yes,
Israel.
that goes in Israel because that happens with my own family against saying stuff about other and then about other people of their color. And I've had it before. I dated a girl once who's from South Africa, and she's Jewish. Her parents were South African. And I said, make sure you tell your parents so they know, despite how light I am African American. It wasn't until I went to college that all of a sudden, the reason was I am not Jewish enough because both of my parents aren't Jewish. And now the reason they said is because I'm too old for her. As if she stopped aging the day we started dating and I just kept getting older. And I said, if my skin was dark, you would hear the real reason. But it's easy to say it for that other reason. But that's Jewish, and they grew up in apartheid South Africa, Jewish. I understand why they feel what they feel. Doesn't mean I agree. If I grew up in apartheid and never knew anything else, and during apartheid in South Africa, and I was my complexion, I'd probably feel the same thing if I didn't learn any different. So I get it, but it exists, and it exists purely off the color of the skin because it's the easiest way to say yes or no to somebody to separate, just off appearances. And it's like what Rudy says, it's the stupidest thing on this planet that because this happens to be a certain, like you say, the black race. What the hell is the black race? What the hell is the white race?
Right.
And what is different inside of your genome sequence for the chromosomes you have? What is different? But you just a race. Why are you adding a term outside of anything but human? A color? A color's a race? So there we go, because it survives because we need to survive and we have fixed resources. I'll repeat this shit till I'm blue. That's what it always goes back to.
But I also do believe that you say the argument's always been given. Color my skin. What does it matter? Whatnot. Psychologically, biologically, right? And you go back to wolf pack, and you go back to community, you go back to the concept that I can harm you if you're different than me.
Mm-hmm.
If we were all one color, I think we would find things to hate over or whatnot. I think it comes down to the human condition psychologically, and I think it very much starts with who you are. And I think because of manipulations and grand manipulations, and I'll add, there's a pattern to these manipulations. I've read Mein Kampf. I'm in the middle of Ford. I've read Anthony Hitchens. These are all people that are using a certain tactic and fear concept to bait you, right? Psychologically, we all just have a father figure, and he's the protector. That doesn't leave from us. So when we go out into the world, we're looking for that father figure. We are looking for that person to lead us, and those people know how to get us tied to them, for us to look at them and such. So I don't want to just stay with your point. I want to give it just some context in the sense that yes, everyone's going to hate everyone. It's an expression from a psyche. It's a nervousness. We all live in a state somewhat of fear. And I feel like everyone has these things. And I'm not going to say the Jewish community is perfect. I'm not going to say the Black community is perfect. But what's ridiculous, I think is absolutely ridiculous, is not to ask yourself, as Rudy said, right? It is not to even ask yourself, is the information that I'm giving my own information?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we get messed over as a society, especially in data world where you're fed the same information. And then last point, and I want to hear Rudy's thoughts also. But for me, the last point, in a sense, that being strong about, we had touched on it, being strong, right, is very much psychological. If we let, unfortunately, the manipulative construct that Blacks are the real Jews, and that Jews should not be, are not Jews, and we give into that. We're fearful. Right now, the Jewish community is fearful. We are scared. I mean, I know friends buying weapons. We are very fearful right now. We need to switch that narrative. We need to stand up, and I'll end with this story where I was playing football, with Jewish friends, and two African-American guys came up. Again, this does not speak to the whole African-American community, but They are fed a manipulation, came over and started screaming, threatening us and whatnot. I sat there 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, just we're taking it. And I just turned up, I stood up, went out of the, mob effect, stood up and said, hey, what are you, I said, what that, F are you doing? Back off. And all of a sudden, whoa, and they backed off and they realized somebody can stand up for some. Oh, there's no platform for you to hurt us. So the Jewish community and the African American community need to stand up strong and not give into the manipulative tactics of our society that keep us low. So, and this then feeds whatever the higher agenda is, not to get whatever. But yeah, Rudy.
Rudy, I have a question for you real quick since I got you. Rudy, I read that Ashkenaz Jews date back to originating in Iran, and that's where split was up, so Persia. Am I off? Is that right? I read it on the internet. I don't know how accurate that was.
Sure. So we had two destructions of our civilization. We had the destruction of the first temple and the second temple. And the Jews were allowed to come back to Israel and rebuild the second temple through the Persian Empire. So we came back, established Judea, and eventually Judea was destroyed by the Roman Empire. And that's where a lot of Jews displaced, that consider themselves Jews, because we came from a land at that time called Judea and created Judaism, which is the portable suitcase of that identity. And you had Jews that moved into Ashkenaz regions, which is why they're called Ashkenazi, which is in Eastern Europe. And you had Jews that moved into Spain, which is why they're called Sephardi, and Jews that stayed in the East or continued to move to the East, which are Mizrahi. And you had Jews that really poured all over. But Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews descend from the civilization at the time called Judea, and that's why we're called Jews today. In response to what Michael was saying, I think you kind of said my point. First of all, for sure, I think first of all, there's no society free of any form of xenophobia, unfortunately, today, and I do wish that one day we will be able to achieve it. But I think there's a difference in the racism that each society experiences, and we have to be careful not to appropriate systemic racism that one society faces with the reality that there is also racism in another society. And people are appropriating suffering. People are using media to manipulate that suffering and to get people to false conclusions. And I think the best way to combat that is to have an open and honest conversation. A lot of people are trying to brush things under the rug, and that's not the way to combat those that are trying to take real information, take it out of context, and manipulate it in the wrong way. The best way to remove that from happening is having an open conversation and dealing with it. To touch back on the point of race, you said it just the same way I usually talk about it. Who decided that we need to have a black people and a white people? Like, why not a brown-eyed people race? Why not a curly-haired people race? A short people race? Like, who decided that it's based on that? And the reason is, like you said, this is the first thing that you visually see. The color of your skin, you see that before the eye color that you have, before the texture of your hair, before the size that you have, because it's the first visible thing that you can see. And because of that, people have manipulated that as a way of dividing ourselves. When it comes to being a Jew, it has nothing to do with what you look like. It has to do with your soul. Even for us within our culture, someone that converts to Judaism, that becomes part of the Jewish nation, we believe is a Jewish soul born in a non-Jewish body that joins their nation. So we need to have an open conversation of ridding ourselves of these ideas of division, of superficial division especially, and having open conversations of uniting us based on our struggles and how do we move past from those struggles, but also not being so susceptible to the manipulation that people that are in positions of power are intentionally projecting out there into the universe and getting us all caught up into it, that forces us to be against one another.
Beautiful. I think it's a beautiful way to end off. I think it's a beautiful way to end off to in a conversation that was so important and so I'm so thankful for this platform, but for the world, that we can fight for the first time in history these manipulations, these things, that we can come together, that we can hear and such. And I know it's cliche, but people get really stuck in their own head, in their own narrative. And I think if we learn from anything, challenge yourself to, you don't have to get rid of the narrative, but challenge yourself to hear a different narrative in your head. Challenge yourself to hear something. And I was going to ask, how do you tell a Jew or African American not to be fearful is, will you guys ask? You know, tell that person to ask.
I agree. This whole thing of concept of fear, I can tell you exactly what I could probably have a good idea what you're afraid of when you tell me what you are insecure about, because we're projecting it forward. We feel what we know about ourselves, and you can't make somebody scared. They become scared when they realize something is exposing an insecurity that they don't have